Hi, everybody. Welcome to our panel discussion. We're going to be talking about game marketing in 2021, advertising and monetization. And yeah, let's maybe introduce ourselves. Mark, would you do the honor in being first?
Sure, happy to. So I'm Mark. I head up the commercial team at MoPub, so responsible for new customer acquisition on the supply side. So pretty much the first person that a lot of developers speak to about monetizing with MoPub.
Fintan, would you like to go next?
Sure, of course. Hey everyone, I'm Fintan Gillespie. I work for Snapchat and I oversee our international gaming business. So we have a dedicated, fully verticalized team that works with all of the largest game developers in PC, console, and mobile gaming across our international business.
Cool. Welcome. And Sam?
Hey guys, my name is Sam. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a UK-based startup called Admix. We're about 50 people now, and what we do is in-play advertising, or what most people call in-game advertising, injecting branded content within the game itself to create a new revenue stream for developers.
Cool, super cool. And I'm Maor. I'm co-founder, CEO of INCRMNTAL. We're an incrementality measurement platform. Sorry. I'm an EdTech veteran, like 20 plus years in the industry, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. And yeah, I'm going to have basically, I got the pleasure to moderate this panel. Maybe starting with the first question, just to break the ice, because we're talking about game marketing here. So what's your guys' favorite game? Just jump in, by the way.
Yeah, sure. I think maybe not the most recent game, but I think one of my favorite on mobile is Dead Ahead Zombie Warfare by Moderator, which is an Eastern European Russian developer. Very much like sort of Plants vs. Zombies style, but purely zombie, no plants. So good fun.
We work with a lot of mobile developers, so I don't want to pick one, but I'll pick a style. So I'm kind of the definition of the new gamer because I'm not really a console gamer, but I've been playing a lot of hyper casual. So you know, every couple of days or every week, download a new batch of hyper casual games, play that for a little bit, and then move on to the next one. So it really varies. I've been playing a couple of racing, hyper casual racing games, swiping games lately.
Nice. I'm last. Well, my favorite game I play all the time since for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years since I met the team is Golf Clash by Admix. So shout out to James and the team up.
Cool. Mine, by the way, I'm big on play rigs on what is it? Gardenscapes. I'm level 8,339. I'm not joking. And I have kids as well, which, by the way, it's like I had to limit the amount of apps they can download because they download so much hyper casual games. So now they're allowed 1 app a day. Yeah.
Do you still see the Gardenscape ads despite being?
Me? No. I'm a whale. I'm a pretty big whale for play rigs, by the way. Cool. Maybe starting with the first question, very much related to hyper casual games. So I think we all know that, like, for the hyper casual growth cycle, like developers heavily relied on the device identifiers for both growth and monetization. Now, of course, we all know about the recent changes that happened with the iOS. Oh, I think we lost Fintan, but hopefully he comes back. How can hyper casual games or the model itself succeed in a world without identifiers, in your view? Who wants to go?
I can jump in and give sort of my perspective of it. So I think we obviously work with a lot of the leading hyper casual developers, so we get some insight into the space. But I guess it's still quite early to know conclusively what the best strategies are in terms of like what channels, what approaches you can take to acquire users in a world without device identifiers. But I think in the short term, what developers are doing and can do is try and mitigate that risk as much as possible. So a lot of developers experimenting with the timing of their ATT prompt to try and maximize the opt-in, because regardless of the supply you're buying, you want to maximize the chance that you actually have IDs to match back to when users arrive in your app. So I think that's one really important step before you even think about marketing and growth, is what can you control within your ecosystem. But to be fair, like what can developers do? I think really testing new channels, new companies, or even companies that are investing in new models for attributing quality. So I think there's a lot of conversation going on LinkedIn and different platforms about, you know, this gray area of not fingerprinting but probabilistic, and how do you build models to assign quality? Or is it a case we go slightly back towards optimizing in aggregate towards source level quality? So I think less to give you a prescriptive answer and more to highlight some of the areas that I think developers should be paying attention to.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, that's true. Obviously not a, I guess a direct answer to the question, but something that we have seen on our end. So what we provide is a slightly different revenue stream that actually relies less on IDFA. So indirectly, we have benefited from this because the revenue is mostly coming from brands. So overall, what it means is because the uncertainty that is currently in the marketplace is kind of forcing developers to look outside the box at new revenue stream, new things that maybe they didn't think of before. And even if it might be early stage, it's worth trying, exactly as Mark said, to mitigate a potential drop. So for us, that's what we've seen. We've seen developers that we had in the pipeline for a little longer this year, maybe in 6 months' time, actually coming earlier and saying, this is one of the things that we want to put in place to mitigate a potential drop. And I think overall, in a way, it's good because it kind of stimulates, innovation and helps developers figuring out new ways to try to make it work and generate revenue.
Yeah, I think, Sam, you touched on a really interesting point about how this impacts performance marketers versus branding. So I think definitely it is harder to run performance campaigns. I think performance advertisers are more acutely focused on the users where they can directly attribute that value. So I think potentially developers are going to see some increase in competition on that smaller subset of high quality users. For the users that don't consent to sharing identifiers, there was some good conversations. I think Liftoff were running some really good conversations about brand advertisers see this as a potential to maybe level the playing field, to give them the ability to buy audiences rather than focusing on individuals. So I think in some ways the brand's appetites for reach, and some people say eyeballs, has actually put them in quite a resilient position to leverage this and still being able to drive value compared to performance marketers.
Fintan, would you like to chime in?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it is definitely a period of change for the industry, and an industry that has been reliant a lot for many years now on the IDFA. I think what we've tried to embrace is embrace Apple's change and get on it early. So, I think the important thing for us at Snap is that, privacy by design is a core sort of tenet of our consumer platform. Like, our app was literally designed with snaps that disappear by default, and we give a lot of privacy control to our users, and this is something that we know our users value. I think if you cast your mind back to LAT, which is prior ATT, we saw increasing rates of LAT opt-in amongst users on iOS. So that obviously is paving the way on Apple's side for these changes. They're seeing that users demand this privacy. So with that all in mind, obviously we jumped on this straight away. And I think we were one of the first platforms globally to roll out full SKAd network support across the platform. And as a result, now we're seeing the majority of the gaming companies that we work with have now implemented SKAd testing, which I think is a positive step in the right direction. I think all we can do in terms of being in control of this migration is making sure that as many advertisers we work with are testing it and getting learnings in the door, and trying to use those learnings to adapt to this sort of new measurement paradigm.
Cool. By the way, I must say that I think Snap did the most beautiful job when it came to the prompt, like really informing the users, what have we been doing with your data? What does it mean? How many ads have you seen? What happens? And again, I think we all agree that the opt-in rates will never get to 100%, or maybe not even the 90s because of limit ad tracking, being kind of there as a legacy. But sure. I think we all agree that those users that do allow consent they at least allow it because they really do trust the brand. They understand
Exactly.
they understand the value they get from allowing the consent. And they're basically not scared that something fishy will happen with their data. When it comes to like this question, so my own view, I think that hyper-casual, the growth model very much relied on quantity versus quality. So, because you could technically have developed 20 hyper-casual games, release into the market, and very quickly kill the ones that do not work. Now, basically by eliminating the ability to do everything on a singular user basis, I think developers are moving towards how can we further monetize the users? So like things like what Admix is offering, pretty much perfect for this timing. And then also, how can we deliver better content that it actually works? Maybe we also see, IPs going hyper casual, like things, that are usually like the big gaming company like EA and so on. They have a lot of IPs, and usually you wouldn't see those type of games as a hyper casual. Maybe we'll see an evolution towards this as well. Moving on to our next question. So I would say, given the changes happening in our industry, what other avenues outside the box developers should be thinking of when it comes to either distribution or monetization, whichever direction you guys want to talk about?
I can give it a start. I mean, like, we've just come out of our third annual Snap Partner Summit, and we announced a multi-year deal with Voodoo. Voodoo came to Snap Games, which is our hub for games. We call them hyper social games actually on Snapchat, because they're hyper casual in their mechanics, but social is at the very heart of the experience, and that social is powered right through chat within Snapchat. So we think it adds quite a unique and fun dynamic to the sort of hyper casual gaming experience, because you can actually play against your true friends, and also integrate Bitmoji, which is sort of our digital avatar for the world. And that's like 75% of 13 to 24-year-olds now using that avatar and familiar with it. So you've got a social connection with your friends, and you've got Bitmoji as a character layered on top. And those two things combined mean dwell time engagement in those games are sort of outstripping games elsewhere. So that's something we're very proud of and something we continue to invest in. So I think if you go back to the overall question, I think we're going to see this proliferation of hyper casual studios starting to look at other platforms for further distribution. Like you see Voodoo, Quali all opening offices in China to do that with WeChat. And you're seeing, a lot of demand on our side coming into Snap Games, which is still an early platform, but I think it's really encouraging to see that sort of migration. Now, right now in games, we obviously offer a revenue share on ads, right? So it's a very similar model that the industry is used to. And then on Android, we've also integrated tokens, so IAP. So I think that's an important avenue, certainly selfishly from our side, but I think we are overall as a trend in the industry going to see more of that as things evolve.
Yeah, on our side, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before. We really think that now is a perfect time for developers to start relying on brand revenue more. There's just a lot of different things that are coinciding that make this really a trend. New formats, obviously, that are more brand friendly, enabling brand to actually be part of the story. But also the fact that brands rely less, on IDFA, as we explained before. They use it for retargeting, of course, but not to track attribution. So it's less reliant on that. The model is less reliant on that. And the pandemic overall really accelerated the perception that gaming is more than games, but actually is starting to become a media channel, which for us, is probably obvious, and it's been obvious for a long time. For a lot of brands and agencies, that thinking is really just getting started, and we are obviously at the forefront of that. But the tools, the infrastructure, the measurement, programmatic delivery, all of this stuff just wasn't really there until very recently, and there was a lot of barriers to entry for brands to tap into that huge audience. But now that there are new companies building this stuff, such as ours, this is really sparking a change. And so if you kind of layer that on top of the IDFA, on top of the pandemic that has accelerated the perception of gaming as something that is really part of the culture, we are really at the birth of a new media channel, and brands are starting to invest huge sums into this channel, which is a massive channel in terms of eyeballs and attention. So it's really exciting times, and I think over the next few years we're going to see a huge bump in brand revenue in game, now that this is starting to be more common knowledge and easier to access for the brands.
Yeah, so I think also coming in more on the monetization side of the question is, I'm hearing from the market, developers are a lot more open to testing new formats that haven't been available to now, with the goal of increasing ad consumption. So I think to your point, Maya, is increasing the aggregate quality of your audience when you can't necessarily attribute it to an individual, to give you more operating margin, I guess. So yeah, there are things like in-game ads or 3D native. We're hearing about audio ads, kind of on-load ads, which is like a interstitial on start. I think, all of these things are innovative and interesting, but just increasing ad consumption doesn't develop that brand and trust aspect you talked about for the opt-in. So it needs to be done in a relatively thoughtful way, making sure that you're introducing as much of the highest quality as you can without trading off on other metrics like retention, opt-in rate, brand loyalty in your app. So I think the second part to my answer would be, what developers really need to think about for monetization now is much like getting consent for push notifications. You need to build a bit of that quality and trust with the user before you spring on them about ATT consent, because if you're familiar with Playrix games, right? You said you're on level something ridiculous like 8,000 of
8,339.
There we go, like a badge of honor. So yeah,
it's one more than previously.
Yeah.
You're playing right now.
I think now there's obviously, I think Farmscapes is the latest one they've released. And you probably have a good sense that's within the same family, and you may even recognize the name of the developer given how much time you've invested. But in a more casual world that's very competitive, where there's a lot of similar looking games with similar themes, they don't immediately know it's your game. They're more likely to think it's made by Unity because they see the splash screen every time. So I would say you need to introduce them to how you're going to treat users within your ecosystem within the short window of time you have them. So maybe for the first few minutes, you're really trying to show the ad consumption's reasonable, not too interruptive to the experience, and maybe leaning to kind of a mid-term, longer-term monetization. I mean in a matter of days, not that long-term, because we're talking about like more casual games predominantly. So I think, yeah, it changes the conversation with users. If you immediately hit users with every consent and you're showing them a lot of interstitials up front, I think that's going to minimize your chances to monetize as effectively as you could.
By the way, from my side, so first of all, Sam, thanks for remembering COVID and reminding us of COVID, because this had a massive influence over the growth of gaming as a channel. In a way, maybe Apple's timing was not the best, maybe, because we're all working from home and they gave us no timing and no documentation. But on the other hand, it was the perfect time because gaming just massively spiked as a channel, and kind of validating to the world what it is. I do like platforms now distributing, offering more distribution channels for games, like what Snap is doing, for example. Because as a user, if you are already doing something within a platform, do other stuff within this platform. So I think that we see this now. We also see gaming companies buying gaming companies to create a similar, I would say, platform, because one of the parameters Apple does allow developers to share is IDFE with their own titles. So it does give you the ability to understand users on a singular level. But on the other hand as well, you are trying to basically find audiences and run your own distribution by yourself on the App Store, rather than working with your partner who is helping you both with monetization, probably with distribution, by enabling your own game within their platform. It's a very smart idea, I would say. I think that most gaming companies love these innovations that are happening in the market. And monetization, we all know it is no longer just a 300 on the 50 banner or 320 on 48 or whatever random sizes our industry picked. Moving on to next question. And by the way, if you guys want to also comment on COVID's effect, please do so. What impact are you guys already now seeing since launch of ATT?
Yeah, so I think it's still very early to scaremonger about, you hear a lot of people quoting what the opt-in numbers are. And I think when we look at the number of people that have updated to 14.5, it hasn't been as quick as usual. And I think part of that is they didn't push notifications for the update. I think 14.6 will give us a better idea of what the baseline is. But I think, there's a lot of people in the industry talking about 20% to 30% of users opting to share IDs. So I think it actually answers an interesting question, is there might be an element of scaremongering because of maybe the severity that consumers will read that wording, like this app wants to track you across, websites and other apps, might sound a bit intimidating. But clearly there is a consumer interest or a consumer want for some level of privacy controls around their data storage and portability. So as much as we're seeing it does, lower monetization for some of the traditional platforms that have access to a lot of consumer data, we're seeing some companies that have really, let's say, excelled in contextual models, starting to be more competitive on those users. But yeah, regardless, I do think that as much as not everyone agrees with Apple's decision and timing and how they've handled it, obviously consumers are embracing it to a pretty healthy degree. If we're seeing 30% of users are opting in, 70% really don't want to be sharing their data with a lot of these apps. I'm still, let's say, hopeful and positive that as users get more familiar with the value exchange and they see these pop-ups more frequently, they'll be as informed as they can to make an actual decision about whether they want to share data. I don't think it will go, let's say you go onto a website and you see accept all cookies or manage my settings, right? And most of us accept all cookies. But because you actually need to go in and select a plethora of options about what you're willing to do, Apple have taken, albeit maybe the more proper approach of a very binary yes or no. So I don't think as an industry, unless Apple make a change, we're never going to get to a place where users 100% just click, allow the app, because I think that just is so easy to say no that they're probably going to if they can't be bothered to look into what data they're actually sharing. So yeah, I think there's a few things we're observing on a psychological side, which will be interesting to see how they play out with consumers at large.
I would echo some of those comments, Mark. I think we're early, very early on our audience network journey. Obviously, we're integrated with you guys, which is fantastic. But yeah, we quickly pivoted to contextual model for our audience network expansion. So we're hopeful that and bullish on our audience network growth with contextual models. I think yeah, and aligning to you on early, we're still very early. There's been no push from Apple. I think, as I mentioned earlier, all we can do with our advertising partners is making sure that they're as prepared as possible and helping them do things like mapping conversion value, best practice around that, helping them get tests out the door so they can gather learnings. And then from a product and engineering standpoint, we're quickly pivoting now to v3.0 SKAdNetwork, network, and it's promising that Apple are making improvements to their system that we can then build upon as a self-attributed network.
I could actually chime in here, myself. So first of all, I agree, by the way. It's like when you look at statistics for opt-in, you need to really read who is publishing them, because I've seen 4% and I've seen 50% as well. I think it doesn't really matter. I think for every developer should try to get the best consent they can from the users they can. That is really the most important thing, and indeed prepare. Preparing needed to be understanding if you are going for a day one conversion value from a distribution standpoint, or if you are willing to basically suffer the consequences when it comes to prolonging this this conversion value, which means a delay in the timer and so on. I think there will be best cases of how to present users with the offering, the value of a certain app. Of course, there's a huge difference between like an app that a user already uses, already has installed on their device, and now they see this new message, and now they need to choose because they have some kind of a relationship with this brand, with this company, versus downloading a new app, and then the first screen you see is, do you allow tracking? I think a lot of the problem, of course, lies with the phrasing, but again, we have no control over Apple, and I think Apple listened to the trend. What I also find very interesting is like my stereotype for an iPhone user versus an Android user is actually would have been an Android user is more aware or more sensitive to data being private. On the other hand, limit ad tracking or LAT for iOS was roughly in the 30%, while for Android is roughly in the 5%. So it's really the opposite of what I would have expected. Both of them, by the way, had it fairly deep in the menus. But again, by popping this opt-in, when you install an app for the first time and you don't yet have a relationship with, it's hard to actually win the trust. And yeah, maybe they'll make changes in the future where allowing the developer to pop this message a second time after some time went by. Maybe the phrasing will be different, but who knows? I think we're doing the best we can, both with the advertising side and the monetization. And, yeah. Sam?
Yeah, impact on monetization. I mean, I think it was the 26th of April on that week, we did see on iOS there were a few advertisers who seemed to have reduced CPM a little bit. We didn't know, how long that would last, and it's certainly already on the way up. And what was interesting is the week after, we've actually seen some of these same advertisers spending more on Android. So I think overall, the market has balanced itself, and it seems like it's very early to tell, but it seems like for most of the advertisers, we kind of came back to similar-ish levels of CPMs on the brand side. But yeah, it did. Some of that spend has been shifted towards Android, which is interesting to see.
Moving to what I think would be the most controversial question for us, given the fact that all four of us are in a certain position within the industry, do we believe that basically fueled by advertising could eventually be replaced by paid apps, subscription services, monetization that have nothing to do with advertising?
Absolutely, we're seeing it. We're seeing already, Mayor. Like you've got. I hate to reference Voodoo again, but they've opened in Berlin to build their casual muscle. I think a lot of the studios are experimenting with IAP beyond just pure hyper casual ads arbitrage, right? So I think the great thing that we have in this industry in hyper casual is you've got games that users absolutely love playing, and so I think I don't think it's that difficult for some of the publishers in the ecosystem to develop these sort of further mechanics to start exploring different avenues for monetization. So I absolutely expect, and I think we're already seeing elements of platforms and publishers moving in that direction.
I have a different perspective on that. I mean, I think those things are not competing; they're more complementary, right? If you look at it on a market level, it's clear that gaming is becoming more and more mainstream, right? You have more and more people playing games, new audiences that didn't play games before. So on the kind of Gartner adoption cycle, we are, already in the early majority and really moving into the late majority where everyone is going to play games one way or another, not necessarily a hardcore game, but everyone's going to play games. And I think as you move towards that majority, those people, there's more and more of them, but they're also less and less likely to pay for things because they're not necessarily passionate. They just want to, just like they would go on Instagram or on Snapchat, they now pull a small game and spend 5 minutes at a time. So in my head, absolutely, the paid apps, that's going to grow. Subscription, this is going to grow. But for every paid user, you get 50 or 100 new free-to-play users. So in my mind, everything is growing. But the free-to-play fringe is actually growing even faster. So I can't think of a world where advertising is not going to be there, just because that free-to-play fringe of the market is growing even faster. It doesn't mean that advertising is always done the right way. That's kind of what we are saying at Admix, for example. But the way, free content is certainly not going to disappear anytime soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's one of those questions where I wouldn't put too much of my own money on the answer. Maybe just a few of my own words and speculations, but I think it's hard to see a world where it would completely shift to sort of a paid model. I just think there's billions of people, and if we look at the average income in the world, it's not really likely to monetize everybody through a premium or subscription model. Maybe in time. But I think ads are really a payment mechanism that allow users to have access to content that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. I do think that paid, like subscription offerings, you've got Apple Arcade, and obviously you've got Netflix talking about making a gaming platform, rumors and stuff. I think that disrupts the premium business model more than it does free to play in the first instance. So if we look at what iTunes did to the music market, I think it's a pretty good analogy that people would rather pay, $6 a month to access a plethora of premium games with very low risk from, traditional developers like Sega, like Nintendo, that might charge $4.99 for a game. So I think that disrupts that. For IAP-based games, I think the trade-off isn't that compelling for them. Why would you want to give up, again, coming back to the Playrix example, if you've spent, a good part of a decade really maximizing monetization, why would you then want to give that up for a subscription revenue when you really think you can identify incredibly valuable players? So I think maybe subscription will happen first, and maybe similar to Spotify, there will be some free options that might be more ad supported, whether that's rewarded video, audio ads, or other kind of innovative formats that are popping up. So yeah, I still think there's a time and place for free games, and until we solve like the income inequality distribution in the world, that's going to be a fact. Even if it doesn't continue in US and let's say premium markets that developers would target, I think it'll be a long time until we say goodbye to advertising only as a business model.
Yeah. By the way, from my perspective, I like the options, like as a user, as a consumer. So you mentioned Spotify, which I think is a very, very good example. I like the option of the paying or not paying, same as I like the option within games to pay or not pay. And personally, by the way, like if we think of what advertising like purpose is to message, is to distribute really messages, to help a company distribute their product or service or so on. We're not evil people. Let's just remember that. I would say that most of the fears that end users have when it comes to data privacy and so on, I don't think any one of our companies, and hopefully no one of the people in this conference ever actually did, but it is a concern for users. And I think that's what ended up kind of like bringing us to where we are in terms of the privacy aspect of it. Yeah, that's so I would say I like the option as a user. I like, if Netflix offered an option that was cheaper but had a bit more ads, probably I would go for it. YouTube, I ended up upgrading to premium because it's kind of like pay or you're gonna see ads like 50 times a day, which is kind of like, okay, I get it. Yeah,
I think just to add, I guess I'm re-quoting myself a little bit, but I think, like you say, using rewarded video as an example, it is just a microtransaction. It's a payment mechanism. It's a choice about how you unlock content. And I think it's the same if everyone remembers like Bubble Witch Saga when it first came out on mobile. This idea of logging in with Facebook and sharing with friends to unlock the next space of levels. It's arguably no different. It gives some value to the publisher and gives some content to the user. So I think I agree with you. I like the choice because if I'm finding an experience really valuable, being able to pay, for the YouTube example, not to see ads, to access some premium content or exclusive content that's only released to YouTube Red and stuff, I think that's quite interesting. But equally, if you just want to swallow as many ads as Google can chuck at you in a day, then you've still got access to free content. And I think users understand that value exchange. I think it will take longer for them to understand the data value exchange because they don't even know what's happening behind the scenes anyway. So how can you convey that to a user in a way that the average Joe would understand?
By the way, one of the apps that I think really does it well as well, we mentioned it earlier, but in a different context, and none of us know this app or use this app, is Tinder. You have like the free app, and I think you can do a lot with the free app, but you can also upgrade certain things. I just know about it from my friends, which is, I think, awesome. And because it's a dating app or a relationship, at some point you might not want to pay the subscription because you found the love of your life, and then I don't know, if things don't work well, maybe you will upgrade again. So again, it gives you all the choices in the world, which I think makes a lot of sense.
I think that choice is actually why gaming is so popular and so mainstream, right? Because you can really find whatever you want. You can spend literally thousands and thousands of dollars to build the best camp in an idle game, or you can just play for free for 5 minutes a day. And if you think about it, it's both called gaming, but the experience and the motivation that motivates these two players are completely different. It's almost a completely different thing. And I think that's quite unique if you compare that with the movies industry, where a cinema ticket is a cinema ticket. You can't really kind of tailor your experience based on your how deep you want to go, except going to see more movies. But I think that's that notion of choice in the business model is actually the reason why we can have so many different audiences that have such different consumption of games and just decide what they want to do and consume it the way they want to consume it.
Well, moving on to our next question. So some advertisers, this is more of an advertising question, said that the whole changes in the industry is kind of pushing them to test other mediums. Now, what would you recommend for developers searching for distribution?
Medium as in what is meant to be
platform. So it means that's TV, print, radio, in-game, podcasts, influencer marketing. What's out of the box now for distribution? That if you've been a developer that's been exclusively focused on the mobile app ecosystem, where should you go beyond?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I'm going to answer your question directly, so feel free to tell me off at the end if it isn't quite what you were looking for. But I think in the context of mobile, there's a few interesting avenues that I think developers should be open to maximize reach and volume more than, I guess, immediate quality. So a lot of developers that haven't traditionally looked at China, I think it's still a very interesting proposition as a large market to penetrate. Obviously, iOS is a little bit simpler, but there are some interesting service providers popping up that do Android APK distribution. And I think definitely, Android's still a playground where you can have a bit more access to data. So it represents like an interesting growth. So for publishers joining today that have focused a bit more of their spend on Android, I think China is definitely an interesting proposition to look at. And I think directly in your question, May, I agree that influencers are still becoming a very interesting medium. YouTube used to be a big, significant one, but I think when you look at the casual market and how TikTok exploded over the last 12 to 24 months, we're seeing a lot of superstar influencers, people followed by millions and millions of people that really have very specific audiences that are looking for entertainment. So I definitely think in lieu of being able to target very specific people, you can start working with influencers that appeal to a very specific demographic, or even a broad one. It really depends on what your objectives are. So I think there are just a few interesting options as additional mediums to explore more from acquisition perspective than a monetization one.
Yeah, by the way, the influencer point, so here, I think that some of the biggest challenges, and this is the things I really like about MoPub, for example, is standardization, the ability to actually understand the value bid in an open market. What is the value? Because today the biggest complaint I get from developers when it came to influencers is that they have no way to know if the cost of the campaign will actually return the investment. Now, here actually pointing specifically to Sam and to Fintan, because you guys actually in a way are able to answer this. how would the future for influencer marketing monetization look like from, I would say, a standardization standpoint, where an advertiser can either bid or basically pay a market price, so demand versus supply, and not just the influencer sets the price and the advertiser hopes it works.
Yeah, I mean, I can start with the influencer piece. I think that's a lot of eyeballs on what Moonactive did last year with Coinmaster. I think they really push the boundaries in terms of a big game platform, like going with A-list celebrities and really pushing heavily into a market like the US for a title that relies on playing against your friends. And I think a lot of other players in the industry are looking at that now and seeing for game launch strategies or for big blitzes, like how can we do something similar? We're seeing a huge amount of, not on the A-list side, but lower down the funnel, a lot of influencer built creatives. So we're seeing a lot of creativity, a lot of just like influencers playing with a game rather than just gameplay videos. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, because if you think about where a lot of these ads go, particularly on Snapchat, like the ads are in between your friends' stories. So to make the ads more native to that experience, it obviously makes a lot of sense, not to just show gameplay ads all of the time. So we're encouraging a lot of the companies that we work with to kind of A/B test that, to get learnings and to have influencers a key part of their strategy. And then I think like in terms of the tracking and measurement, like we have introduced some tools on our side that makes that organic distribution and tracking of it a little bit easier. So we have something called Creative Kit, which allows you to share any piece of gameplay as a badge onto Snapchat as a snap. So I think like the replay of a level that you've just completed, you want to just share that as a snap to your friends, and your friends see it, they can swipe up and download the game. So those sorts of mechanics haven't been as widely embraced, I would say, in gaming, but certainly on the consumer app side, like apps like Yubo and others that we work with have got their virality simply from that mechanic, which I think is super, super interesting. And then obviously going back to some of the stuff I said earlier, like, yes, like as Mark mentioned, China's becoming really interesting. We're seeing just really interesting demand on our side, on the game side, and integrating on games. So I think we're going to see gaming companies not just launch in the App Store when they launch a game, but potentially look at launching on other platforms at the same time to just increase that overall distribution.
Yeah. I think just one interesting point that kind of arises in my mind from that is, as influencers become, let's say, a bigger part of the media plan, so to speak, I do think, this real-time component you talked about, Maya, like sort of this idea that in the MoPub platform, obviously we have bidding, so we try and show the right advert at the right time, simply put, based on price. I think the biggest inhibitor of that kind of automation and efficiency coming to influencer marketing really depends on the platforms, right? There needs to be an incentive for TikTok to open up their platform for people, to build platforms on top to bid on that. Because today they completely control their influencer marketing program, their creator fund, I think they call it. So they determine the price that's paid without negotiation to their influencers, and it's a very closed ecosystem. And obviously it makes sense when you have that many sort of millions of DAU. Of course, you want to keep most of that to yourself. But I think as it becomes a more interesting performance marketing medium, there will be pressure to open up those platforms to some degree, so that advertisers are able to transact on either specific context like keywords, or also just on specific people where trackable, at a price point that makes sense from a quality perspective. So I think it's opening up an interesting avenue, and we'll probably see similar trends to what we've seen with programmatic display in the past. It just takes some time.
Yeah. I think programmatic was kind of like the direction I was thinking of. And then Sam, basically you guys monetize like in game. You see your company kind of like going into monetizing in influencers?
Potentially, I guess with a twist. There's a few cool formats that we will be launching later this year, which are more, I would say, be kind of linked to a virtual influencer. If you think about it, you have multiplayer games with people that are playing the game with a huge audience, and those people can actually within the game promote other things. They can promote brands. They could even promote other games. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. Not by setting a platform for influencers to promote games, but more to leverage their exposure inside the game and be able to promote other entities from within the game.
So basically, for like the game streamers, influencers, which is a huge channel.
Yeah.
My kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my kids can spend hours looking at random YouTube videos and Twitch videos of someone playing Minecraft with the most annoying voice ever. By the way, it's a 7-year-old son. Cool. We have like one question from the audience, which we'll definitely get to, but a bit more of a personal question. Do you guys allow tracking?
I think it goes back, Mayor, to your question around trust and your trust of that app. I don't think it's going to be a blanket like user saying no to everything or yes to everything. I think it really is related to your trust of that app and probably your usage of that app, I would say. Like we refer a lot to a global privacy survey done recently by Ernst & Young, and they asked people in that survey, like, their opinions on privacy. And the most important things to people in that are secure collection and storage of their data, trust in the company collecting the data, and transparency on how that data is being distributed and used. And so I think the platforms that are very clear on that are the platforms where I think we'll get more often, and the platforms that don't, like we've mentioned some examples where the prompt is just shown straight away without any context, I think we'll struggle a little bit more.
Yeah, I think from my side, maybe to be a little bit divisive, I think in the scenario where I don't know the developer and I open an app and you force me to make that choice before I've had any exposure, it's a no. Like that's my personal comfort level. If it's a random game that looks nice from the get-go, you look at the video ad that's showing on another game that you're playing, you open it and then it says, enable push notifications, allow app tracking, access to devices on your network. It's a no, just because you're forced to make that decision with relatively limited information. And, as if you take research into your privacy seriously, or even if you're just conservative, if you're forced to make a decision without the complete picture, then of course it's not going to be in the developer's favor. If I'm familiar with the developer and I'm comfortable with the games, maybe I'm biased as a supporter and an active participator in this community, then I will give permission to track. But yeah, it really is just a case of new developers that are looking to get a place at the table. I think you need to be thoughtful about when you introduce these requests.
Yeah, I agree with that. Generally, it's most likely a no, but it kind of depends on the case-by-case scenario.
So from my side, so I actually put thought behind every time I get requests, because I know that it's not going to only be used to show me more relevant advertising. Take LinkedIn, for example. Do I want LinkedIn's platform to know my IDFA and understand me personally better? Yeah, of course I do. And the same goes for Netflix. That I think Netflix also had the prompt and play weeks. For sure, I gave them my consent, but that's an easy one. So I actually think of what could they be doing with my IDFA, and I think here, of course, like the fact that I'm a member of this community, in a way, I'm really understanding. I'm really making a conscious decision. For sure, it's not a blanket yes to everything just because, and definitely, I do not have limit ad tracking. So I do want to see the pop-up. And again, I really did find it fascinating. So my daughter, by the way, just had, I allowed her Snapchat last week. So like going through the entire experience and seeing how much is presented to me, I really did appreciate it. I really do appreciate, the clear explanation and not, I don't know, here's the link to our T's and C's and go enjoy. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, that's personally for me. The last question we had, and this is also a question that was posed by the audience. So people asked us if we think Google will take a following route. We also had it, but our audience here to this panel asked us exactly the same question.
Yeah, so I think from from my side, I've misplaced my crystal ball. So again, I'll take a guess on
The oracle mark.
Yeah. So I think, like, to refer back to my previous comment, given the sort of opt-in rates we're seeing, there is some consumer interest in these privacy controls. So I do think that there will be, let's not say social pressure, but a market pressure on Google to take some similar approach, at least in what they're trying to achieve. So bring in some better privacy controls to consumers. I'd say, from at least there's rumors in the industry that Google are discussing this, but who knows? Everyone likes to pretend they've got the fresh scoop on these things. But ultimately, Google is an advertising company compared to Apple being very much a hardware company, as well as call it a SaaS company in terms of IAP and subscription. So I think Google's duty of care and consideration might be a little bit more consultative with the publishers that drive a significant part of its business, because ultimately they have good context on how the advertising industry works. They're one of the top user acquisition sources for a lot of publishers or advertisers that aren't ready to invest in big UA teams. People set up on Facebook or Google and run small campaigns to start with. So I think, yes, Google will do something. Will it be more suitable for the industry? I would hope, but I think it would be pretty difficult to have Apple doing it and see no response from Google to show they're invested. Because like you say, the idea in my mind is Android users often say, I like Android devices because of customization and privacy. And although that doesn't show itself in the numbers from what you quote, I still think that it's an important PR for their brand and how they treat consumers. So yeah, that would be my guess. I'll put 10 euros on it, but that's about as confident I can be predicting the future.
From my end, by the way, so I definitely think that so if you look at the history of tracking and changes in deprecation of identifiers and so on, Google will do something similar in my view. So I do have a crystal ball here. The question is when, and for sure, they do not hurt themselves nor the ecosystem. So neither the demand nor the supply side. So if you look at the Chrome, for example, they're deprecating third-party cookies, but they're offering the sandbox approach, which in a way is kind of similar to SKAd network, if you think about it. Yeah, but I think that they will definitely give users the options. I don't know if the market is like, of course, we are very much like in the market, so we hear about it, we know about it, but I don't know yet if there is a market share shift between iOS and Android enough for Google to really be concerned about this. Maybe there is legislation that could force, but I think eventually whatever Google will do, for sure, it will take the community, the ecosystem, the industry into consideration. I think that whatever Google will do will give sufficient time, preparation, and documentation. Yeah, I think that they're for sure, like Apple is Apple, and like good and bad. It's like they release things almost with a surprise to the market. But on the other hand, as an iOS user, like it. Like I actually really like their product. So no complaints there.
I completely agree with everything you've all said. I think like users are demanding privacy, and I think that will dictate things. So I think in an industry and world where particularly younger and more savvy users demand privacy from the platforms that they use, I think that will ultimately dictate what the major platforms do over time.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think we have to remember that even though it was kind of disruptive for the industry, for the user, it is a good thing that they have choice over that kind of information, because that information is used to serve ads, yes, but it was also abused and used for other things. So I think it's a correction in the market that is good overall for the user, and it's kind of our responsibility to figure out ways to generate revenue for the publishers without having to sell all their user data away. So I think it's a disruptive change, but overall it's good for the users, and because of that, we've always been quite supportive of it, and just looking to see what Google is going to do next.
So by the way, I literally just Googled the question: will Google deprecate GAD? No consensus yet. We have one last question, which apparently is our last question for this panel. Can we expect new ad formats near future, more experience friendly, not breaking the game flow for hyper casual games? Maybe click now, see ad later. Oh, like bookmarking ads. I really like that. Can we see these formats?
So I think Sam wants to jump in first, right?
Yeah,
you go first.
Sam.
I'm a bit biased. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the reason why we created Admix is, I used to be a game developer myself, and just felt that there was a place for a business model that would put the user first, that doesn't interrupt the experience, and that enables users to consume that branded content, which feels more like a sponsorship or a partnership than an ad. Is really exciting when you hear people, we've done focus groups and you hear people comment about the experience. It's very, very different experience. They don't feel that it's, someone trying to sell them something or to click on a button, but it's part of a story, a wider story, which is exciting. So we think that, just like Google AdWords results are very kind of intertwined with the organic results, and the Facebook feed ads are very within the content. We think that gaming until now is lacking that, because the ads and the content have always been separated. And we know that to drive true engagement, you need the branded content to be as native as possible with the rest of the content. So that's kind of what the approach that we're following. Starting with simple format, banner, videos, but as I hinted before, this is not going to stop there. We're building the platform to kind of power those in-game future business models. So that's really what we focus on. We call that in-play, and everything we are going to do is always going to be inside the gameplay itself, but there might be different type of formats. To just jump on what you said, like bookmark and ad, like we've actually tested those kind of things where, you would see different ads and then you can consume them later. It is a nice idea in principle. What we're finding is that if you start to look at metrics like, CTR and other type of engagement metrics is generally not really competitive, because a lot of this stuff happens in the moment, right? It's like, oh, wow, what a nice game. Let me download it. People are not really thinking, oh, let me get back to it in 10 minutes and check my notification tray and try it. So we've tried notification ads that were kind of like hidden behind the game, or we've tried things where you have to, only when you close the game, you're directed to another page, but then it feels like intrusive because something opens and you don't remember why. So it's really tricky, honestly, to do those kind of things. And so far we're sticking to the model inside the game as the best compromise.
Anything to add?
I think just as well, I give another selfish perspective from Snap, but I like many of the ad formats that we designed are native to the experience of the application. So if you think about a lot of the work that we've done in augmented reality, like the camera is such a core part of the experience on Snap, and the ads that advertisers are creating there, are contributing to that experience, like you mentioned, Sam. So I go back to my favorite game, Mayor, as we wrap this up, but Playdemic Golf Clash, like they have an amazing AR ad on Snap where it turns your head into the golf ball and you get basically put into a hole-in-one experience. And the recognition of that game, not just driving business results, but appearing on their social channels from users who are just sharing them like organically, I think like shows you that when you get these experiences right and they contribute to the overall experience of the platform, users love them, will actually share them further for you.
Yeah, I guess I'll make one comment to close out, but we're a few minutes over, so let people get to the next session. I think we have all of the components to optimize the user experience from an ads perspective. We have traditional banners, we have native ads, whether that's 2D, 3D, we have audio ads popping up. I think all of the raw components are there. Part of it just comes about making it contextually relevant to the experience and making sure it fits with the app. I think Sam was kind of pertaining to that, is you need to place things in the right way so the user understands and it's complementary. I think the biggest challenge for the industry is just bringing all of those components together. So if you were a MoPub customer today and say you wanted to experiment with Admix in-game ads, how do you make that dynamic decision about what opportunity to show? Do we want to pop up an opportunity for a rewarded video, or do we just want to place some in-game ads that have like brand buyers? I think it's a very interesting challenge that we're going to work together as an industry to solve. But I think bringing these together more cohesively will really give developers the flexibility to optimize to individual cohorts based on their activity.
By the way, an idea. So I used to have this when we could understand things on a per user level, but now maybe we don't. Give users the choice. Like maybe we see an option where like developers give users the choice of the layout of the game when it comes to monetization. Means which ad formats would you like to see in your experience? But that's, maybe someone's doing that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think machine learning offers some solutions there, because choice is just another decision to add to the fatigue. I think using signals to determine what the player type would appreciate makes more sense. If they index towards IAP, then maybe it's just rewarded video. If you're seeing low engagement, maybe you're actually forcing more in-game ads just to get impressions, for brand advertisers. I think advancements in automation will really help personalize the experience. Even if you can't quite do it on like an accurate cohort of one, you can still use signals to sort of deterministically say whether it made sense.
Cool. Then I think we're over time. So I guess the moderator is supposed to join us now and tell us bye. Yeah. Okay. So thank you all for your time. I think we're getting kicked out. It's been a real pleasure. Have a lovely weekend.
And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. All the best.
Thanks,
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.